This video is airing for SAHCon 2023. Hello, live audience, and hello, people listening in the future. This video is dedicated to the following people: Janiyah Riley, Yoitz Crow, and Anna Articulately Composed for always having my back. Thank you to my cats, Funny, Pumpkin, and Bonehead for being cute. And thank you to all my haters who think I'm stupid. Please enjoy this video. It was very hard to make. Production was tough. As I'm writing this, it's like 10 days away from SAHCon. But I really hope you enjoy it. This has been knocking around my head for years and years and years. And I hope you enjoy seeing me go insane. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have not, check out SAHCon, SAHCon, for this year or next year. Thank you. It is not good for a man to be alone. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. For a solo player, a challenging quest becomes an insurmountable one. Arania's Circuit, Homestuck 5993. The year is 2012. Amy Marie, a shy 16-year-old girl from Michigan with long black hair, one of her friends from band told her to sign up for a website called Tumblr. Behind the screen of her mother's Windows Vista PC, located in the living room, Amy Marie is one search bar away from all the fan art, fanfiction, and discussion she could ever dream of. Soon enough, she has a dozen followers, some from her school, some from places she's never been, all brought together by the giddy excitement of teenagers exploring media. She loves Supernatural, she loves Hetalia. She is eager to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender when she can bother her mother enough to buy it on DVD. One day, Amy Marie sees something from that friend from band class, a post that stops the finger on her scroll wheel, a clumsy digital drawing of a character she's never seen before, with pale gray skin, bright orange horns, and sharp teeth. Her friend calls it a troll sona. Amy smiles and forgets. Soon, she will see so much that forgetting isn't possible. Religion is the shared reverence for the supernatural, sacred, or spiritual, as well as the symbols, rituals, and worship that are associated with it. This is according to primatologist Frans de Waal in his book, The Bonobo and the Atheist. Religion is the belief and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods. This is according to the Oxford Dictionary. These definitions approach religion, but I feel they are somewhat incomplete and too specific. Religion is not so much an institution as a deep psychological experience held by many people. Religion as it functions to human beings is a great many things for a great many purposes. In the book The Bonobo and the Atheist, religion is approached from a deep and evolutionary perspective, viewing religion as a human practice from our very beginnings. Frans de Waal says in the book, all societies have religion. Society and religion are in fact the same serpent with two heads. As ancient man moved from forests to open areas, we did not simply develop upright limbs and tool use, but different minds as well. As our brains expanded past our ape contemporaries, we developed not only an increased capacity for reasoning, but a higher capacity for emotion. This was in service to our new uniquely human hobby, complex socialization. As the mind increased in size, we became smarter and more empathetic, we became more social, and the groups we formed became larger. Around these new groups, rituals formed. Ritual is observed in many species, from the grooming of chimps to the calls of whales. They are behaviors that are entirely social in function, performed not by individuals but by groups. Ritual is the sinew connecting members to groups and solidifying our bonds between each other. Man first emerged from the forest to plain, but 11,000 years ago he emerged again. From the plane of hunting and gathering to the city of commerce and agriculture. These ancient humans were no longer satiated by simple rituals. As their populations ballooned, so too did the intricacy of their spirituality. Large-scale organization is possible due to our larger brains and capacity for reasoning, but we needed to rationalize our place in the world and the inequity born of society. directors and kings emerged, and they needed to prove to their lessers why they were more important. It is thought that the first men who needed to prove their superiority invoked the sun to indicate their elevated position, and height is indicative of power to this day. From the step pyramids of the ancient Middle Americas to the flying buttresses and cavernous ceilings of cathedrals of Europe, to the spires of modern churches. The earliest religion is often falsely named as Hinduism, but primitive religions from Mesopotamia and Egypt can be traced back over 8,000 years, predating the invention of writing. Think of that. We had gods and demons with us from before we could scrawl symbols upon clay. Early religions were primarily polytheistic, such as the Egyptians, with the names you recall from world history: Ra, Isis, Set, et al. This evolved into the Greco-Roman tradition of mighty heroes and intricate myths like Zeus, Hermes, Hercules, and Odysseus. Around that time, monotheism was being developed by the Zoroastrians, as well as Hinduism and Buddhism. Later came Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These religions were the scaffolding around which these societies were constructed. They are often thought, especially in the modern post-Enlightenment age, to be extraneous from society, but that couldn't be further from the case. Where you find society, you find religion without fail. Separation of church and state is the pipe dream of hemp-smoking men with no teeth. The ancient Egyptians would not have built the pyramids without stories about Ma'at weighing a feather against your heart, and the Christians would not have gone to war without the Muslim Turks to crusade against. Religion is the engine of society. It is behind our morals, our organization, our very beings. After the invention of writing, we see religion becoming more formal with developments like holy texts, used to great effect in every named religion the world over. The Gathas of Zoroastrianism, the Vedas of Hinduism, and the Holy Bible of Christianity. These books united people across land and gave adherents beacons to rally around. Writing also influenced schism and fracture, like the fateful nailing of the Theses to the door of the church by Martin Luther, leading to dozens of Christian sects in the modern day. Religion evolved with us. It was there from the beginning, the embodiment of simple ritual elevated by our uniquely advanced minds. Religion is humanity. It is more than the singular worship of one set of gods or the fighting done in their name. Religion, in totality, is the single driver of human ingenuity since we were banging on animal skin drums in caves around grand fire pits. We are religion. Religion is us. It is a feature of the collective unconscious, and it goes far beyond what we imagine today. To call religion spirituality or belief undersells the concept. Religion is the inborn and involuntary urge for humans to create meaning and bond with each other. You may have noticed by now, however, in our media age dominated by computers and screens, Christianity and Islam are old news. Hinduism and Greco-Romanism are considered relics. There are adherents, of course, but our society is increasingly secular. Secular even for people who consider themselves religious. Religion now serves us, furthering our political and ideological ends. It is no longer religion that drives our ideology. It is reversed. After all, as said by Nietzsche, God is dead. He did not speak of God in the sense of a supreme being, but God is synecdoche for world religion. It appears that religion is dying. We are skeptics and we cannot cotton to the notion of a Sky Daddy weighing our sins. Sky Daddy is dead. There is a vacuum in our heart, then. In a world where God is dead, we still have this cavernous urge and need for some religion. To turn a phrase of a friend of mine, a God-shaped hole. What will replace religion, then, in a modern day? For Nietzsche, he assumed we would have to forge our own meaning and emerge as superior man. This would lead to a brave new world of reason and intelligence, and a new species of man unburdened with simple superstition. This would have been a wonderful world. Did it happen? No. The reality has been far more hilarious and idiotic. No one will reap except what they sow. Quran 6:164. Maybe you got what you deserved, you stooted fuck ass. John Egbert. Homestuck, 2628. The year is 2014. Amy Marie, the girl from Michigan, is a senior now. She still goes on Tumblr, but her interest in Italia and supernatural is gone like a discarded toy. Her mother never did buy her Avatar on DVD, but Amy Marie forgot that too. She found something that she could read home online for absolutely free. Tumblr is beautiful and horrible, the dumping ground for all the creativity captured inside young men and women confused, spilled onto deep blue. It's arguments, it's falling outs, it's war, and all the worst of what anonymous people have to offer, but it's also wondrous and captivating and breathless. Behind the screen lies her whole world, but it is about to spill forth. Amy Marie is going to SAHCon for the first time. Her big sister is driving them both, and Amy is in a Jade Harley cosplay. Her hair is already long and black, and buying the glasses and Jade's shirt only cost $20 on a bootleg online store. Even so, she is more nervous than she has ever been. SAHCon is terrifying and exciting. It's nothing that she expected and more. The venue is hot, the staff is exhausted, the guests are creeps, and instead of food, they're selling $20 boxes of cardboard. In spite of all this, there are smiling faces beneath pale gray makeup. There are nervous laughs from people adjusting their fake orange horns, and one boy shows off his sharp fake teeth. It is the best day of Amy Marie's life. In a famous letter to a fan, Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, wrote the following. My dear Ruby, Sherlock has become very lazy and I am very stupid, so that I am afraid there will not be any more stories about the strange things he has done. But both he and I are very pleased when we hear we have given pleasure to nice little girls. I showed him your letter, and he said that your signature showed him that your father was about 45 years of age, that your hair was brown, and that you were a clever little girl with a turn for everything except mathematics. That was what he said, but he smokes too much and has been getting quite muddled lately. Your affectionate friend, A. Conan Doyle. This he wrote in 1893 in August, shortly before killing Sherlock Holmes. Ruby, the mononymous writer of the original letter, was what one might call a fan of Sherlock Holmes. The individual who bought the 19th century letter for $12,500 could also be considered a fan. The network of people who are interested in the letter and Doyle's writings could be called a fandom. Fandom may have its roots as far back as the 19th century, but even so, that is a drop in the bucket compared to the history of humanity. The human capacity for making media and commenting on it is a rather modern notion, but the behavior itself is not new. I already spoke of Martin Luther pinning his theses to the church door, an act which in the modern age might seem rather quaint, but in a world just before the printing press, a letter on the door for the public to see was the easiest way to disseminate information. Media critique is the modern equivalent of the ancient urge to comment on and discuss media. It is simply the media of today is not spiritual in nature. Instead of writing letters to priests, modern man writes their letters to authors. If you perform a cursory search, you will see that the earliest fandoms are often cited as Sherlock Holmes or Star Trek. In either case, it seems long-formed serialized work lends itself to fandom, and that remains true in the modern era. An era where you can't walk 2 steps without seeing some kind of pop culture item. Usually it's Minions. The purpose of fandom and the purpose of religion are much the same. In fact, at their core, they are an activity concerned with the building of communities through ritual. Religion forms due to worship, and fandom creates community around media. But if you look broadly at them, they are an expression of the same urge. In a world growing more secular, religious tradition and ritual is becoming a vacuum filled by popular culture and media items. This, of course, is not necessarily bad. The main difference between the two is the idea of faith. That religious adherents have an actual belief in their ritual, whereas fan communities' rituals are done for their own sake with a suspension of disbelief. Or, put another way, Catholics believe priests actually commune with God, whereas no one thinks a cosplayer is actually Cloud Strife. Much like the religious pilgrims who make a sacred journey to a holy site, devoted fans travel far and wide to visit iconic sites that are intimately connected with their fandoms, such as King's Cross train station in London for Harry Potter fans, Graceland in Memphis for Elvis fans, or Comic-Con International in San Diego for Comic-Con fans, end quote, says Michael A. Elliott in his piece Fandom as Religion. Fandom also has many advantages to religion. Religion expects a commitment and mutual exclusivity, whereas people weave in and out of fandoms at will. Fandom is less demanding and less confrontational, and therefore accepts more members and has fewer penalties for leaving. In short, fandom is quickly replacing religion as the driver of our societies. We can see it in the ways media is discussed in the modern day. For example, the word Hollywood, the name of a street in Los Angeles, California, where there are many famous movie stars and production companies, is often used as synecdoche for mass media in general. We say that, quote, Hollywood is influencing us, or, quote, Hollywood sickos are pushing agendas. We speak of these drivers of media with the same reverence as we might have one day talked about the Catholic Church in the Dark Ages. We speak this way because media drive our culture. For the quintessential example, look no further than Disney. Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, Disney Animation, all of these movies and shows are titanic in the modern psyche. Even if you haven't seen the movies, you've been exposed to the memes and references incessantly. You know the plots to movies you've never seen. They permeate our consciousness. So it is only natural that the discussion of them and exploration of them has become our new way of interacting with the world. Making sense of the world starts and stops at analyzing media. Even posts from your Facebook friends. All of it is in service to the media we consume. We list our favorite movies and TV shows in our dating app bios and our About Me sections on social media. And in person, the first thing we ask new people is, what music do you like, or what shows do you watch? Again, to be clear, I'm not saying this is bad. Media is fun, and watching shows is fun. Discussing them can be very meaningful too, but we have to understand what is going on here. As I stated, the only difference between religion and fandom comes down to this idea of faith. A religion is a community based around a belief, whereas a fandom is a community based around a subject. One is serious, one is play. People who like Harry Potter do not truly believe in him, but he can still influence millions to stand in line for the midnight release of the works featuring him. The remedy of weakness is not brooding over weakness, but thinking of strength. Teach men that strength is already within them. Swami Vivekananda, Hindu monk. Anyone with his wits is fond of being strong. Equius Zahak, Homestuck 2827. The year is 2016. Amy Marie hasn't been on Tumblr in a long time. She's studying nursing at good old U of M. She's forgotten her 3 visits to Youmacon, and she barely thinks about her friend from band who roped her into that webcomic. But Amy Marie remembers, even in forgetting. She remembers every time she looks up at the clock after staying up too late to read 4:13 a.m. She remembers every time she sees a Sharpie marker or a stray bucket. She smiles knowingly when she eats candy corn. On a lark, she checks her Tumblr late one night after her exams, and she's shocked to see the place in flames. Against all odds, the webcomic is all over. That's what everyone is saying. She hasn't read it in ages. She's used to the interminable pauses and hiatuses. She's used to false promises and catastrophic Kickstarter campaigns, but against all the odds, they're saying it's over now. But she knows it's not. In 2009, Homestuck's first page was posted on April 13th, a day that would live in infamy. The Homestuck fans at the beginning of the webcomic were, according to author Andrew Hussey, mostly straight men and programming nerds, a demographic he earned from his previous projects, including the unfortunately named Team Special Olympics, as well as the other webcomics on Homestuck's original website, mspaintadventures.com. The fans were secluded to the site's internal forum, or the MSPA forums, where Andrew Hussey discussed the writing of his comic with fans. He took submissions for character names, character actions, and plot details, as well as riffing with users about different topics, such as the character Jigsaw from the movie Saw. Early Homestuck was highly referential, both of previous work and various pop culture from the 90s. In its first 2 years, things were rather quiet, business as usual on MSPA, and Andrew Hussey had no idea what was coming. In 2011, things got serious. It's difficult to say how it happened specifically or who patient zero was for this outbreak, but Homestuck erupted onto the social media blogging site Tumblr in a big way. This expanded its fan community from MSPA readers and forum goers to a fast-moving young teen audience used to discussing anime and American TV. This was largely due to the introduction of the Trolls, the candy-corn-horned race of people from the planet Alternia. As 2011 grew into 2012, the fandom reached a peak, and Andrew Hussey had to make accommodations to the site to deal with new traffic. To most aspiring comic artists, this would be a godsend, but one feels that Andrew did not quite expect or appreciate the hype. His supporters certainly didn't. Sadly, through my slog of the archived MSPA forum posts, I could not find much historical data to back me up on this claim, but those who were around the forums at the time can attest that the mood was somewhat resentful of their new fan base. Hussey, while not outright resentful, seemed out of touch with his new fans. This, he wrote, about fan-favorite character Nepeta in Homestuck Book 4's commentary published by Viz Media. Quote, "The previous page's note contained way too much fucking Nepeta meta. Let's get some actual good shit," end quote. Even so, in 2012, a Kickstarter was launched by Hussey to try to capitalize and reinvest. An ill-fated adventure game was funded to the tune of $2 million. Real US dollars. While 2012 was the height of the fan community, it began to deflate under its own weight in the following years, though the fan base did stay concentrated on Tumblr. In 2013 and 2014, convention attendance was high at comic and pop culture events around America, to the point that Homestuck fans got a reputation as giddy, neurotic teens. Perhaps not entirely unearned, if stories of spit buckets and Sharpie baths are to be believed. On top of this, Homestuck began receiving hiatuses, which stymied longtime fans and new Tumblr fans alike. This inspired a great deal of fan art and fan fiction, but production on Homestuck slowed. By 2015, between sporadic updates and lagging development on the adventure game, Homestuck's interest was waning. Strong, but waning. It was a peaceful decline, with some even wondering if Homestuck would ever really finish. Still, fans had more than enough to go on, with fan art and official works like Paradox Space to keep them busy. And of course, in 2016, Homestuck ended. It was rather shocking, the sudden drop of a final cinematic after long waits and extensive character sections of interminable text from the characters. Homestuck was over in a sudden flourish. The internet came together once again to say, "Wow, Homestuck is over. That's wild," then receded back into their respective fan spaces. In the coming years, Homestuck's media would migrate primarily to Twitter and Reddit, the two platforms holding the torch for their little webcomic, and their devotion would be rewarded, or punished, depending on who you ask, with the Homestuck epilogues and the announcement that Viz Media would be taking over the website. Homestuck 2 launched and unlaunched in 2020, and in the 3-year interim, no official media has been published. The Homestuck adventure game released 2 parts, leaving the narrative unfinished, but still very fun. Nowadays, Homestuck fans congregate on Twitter to post fan art and discuss characters. In spite of the mishandling of the Homestuck.com domain by Viz Media, Homestuck appears to be alive and well, with projects like the unofficial Homestuck collection archiving what could not be archived online through old web design and dead Flash. Homestuck in 2023 is comfy and rather quiet, though perhaps that is for the best. That is a perhaps sinfully brief account of Homestuck's fan history, but it will become important later, so bear with me. If you're looking for something more in-depth, look up Sarah Zed's Homestuck videos. Homestuck's popularity was uncommon in the fandom space, but not without precedent. It dropped at a time where indie-published webcomics were in full swing, but was adaptable enough to appeal to a new audience. The question of why was Homestuck popular is the same question you could ask of properties like Undertale, Minecraft, Lore Olympus Cave Story, or any other breakout indie project. It's good, and it's accessible. Homestuck was and is free and easy to consume, Now less easy, but still entirely free and entirely compelling. A lot of people complain about the way the beginning of the comic drags or in the change of style of later acts, but those questions of quality pale in comparison to the fact that, unlike 90% of pop culture, gaining access to it is just free. You type in Homestuck on Google and you're there. You leave the tab open to remember it later and keep reading. It doesn't cost anything, it doesn't weigh anything, and there are literally thousands of people online who want to talk to you about it. Furthermore, fan works like wiki, fanfic, and fan art have a constant stream of material for people to peruse, more coming out daily. Anyone can make their own fan troll with art skills or with online doll makers. You can become a fan today, and new fans will flow in as long as that remains true. So really, Homestuck's success and continuing popularity aren't a surprise at all. Who knows how much longer it will last, but let's see where it all goes. Cut down the whole forest of selfish desires, not just one tree only. Cut down the whole forest, and you will be on your way to liberation. Buddha, Dhammapada. I have seriously just been assuming her complete takeover of all leadership duties was some fait accompli shit for 3 solid years, and have been enjoying the peace and quiet of zero responsibilities. Carcat Vantis, Homestuck 7460. The year is 2020. Amy Marie works at Target folding clothes. The nursing thing didn't work out, but from what her friends who graduated tell her, she didn't miss anything. She is on Twitter nowadays. She pulls the mask away from her face in a break room to eat her lunch and checks Twitter on her phone. Notifications are sparse, so as if in a trance, she opens the search tab and looks at her old haunting grounds. She expects to see a few posts. She expects to see words like remember and phrases like used to be and a long time ago, but what she sees shocks her. Accounts younger than she is with more followers discussing the webcomic as if it hadn't ended. New games, new stories, new fan art, new fan fiction, new drama, new people. Repeats of the same arguments she once had on Tumblr, held somewhere new. Amy Marie clicks retweet once, then twice, then a dozen times, and before long she's sucked back in. It's all the horrors capable of anonymous young men and women, but the background is stark white and baby blue now. Things always change into the same things. Then, far down the search page, she sees something that she hasn't seen before. A tweet advertising an online convention to be held in Discord in July. According to the website readmspa.org, Homestuck is 817,929 words long. According to wordcounter.io, the King James Bible is 783,137 words. I'll let you decide on the cultural meaning of this fact. These two documents have more in common than simply a word count, however. In fact, Homestuck has a great deal in common with many holy texts throughout a wide variety of religions. The Quran, Bible, and Torah of the Abrahamic faiths all share various traits. Broadly, they serve two main purposes: to disseminate knowledge about God as God is known through the respective religion, and to disseminate moral and practical teachings. It does this through the heavy use of legend and myth. Essentially, these books construct various disparate stories: Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, Abraham destroying idols, etc., and expect the reader to interpret meaning from them, usually with the help of a holy scholar such as a priest, rabbi, or imam. This is particularly true of the New Christian Testament, which follows the central figure of Jesus in several accounts until his death. The advantages of having a holy book can't be understated. Its purpose in the long term is to have a standard set of texts that give religion continuity since its founding, as well as to have its stories be interpretable through whatever cultural lens they can be viewed in. Homestuck, too, could be considered a work of myth and legend. Good and evil are defined and explored, much like in most religious texts, but other metaphysical things are there too. Beyond this, there are certain aspects of Homestuck that are left intentionally ambiguous or symbolic. creating enough intrigue to form a more formal religion around. In other words, if Homestuck was a holy book, what sort of religions would form around it? What traditions would emerge? What dogma and traditions have already arisen in the real world around Homestuck? I just made you listen to however many minutes of exposition just to get to this incredibly moronic point. Allow me to have a single laugh at your expense. Ha. A long time ago, before Homestuck actually ended, there was a moderately popular fan theory that is the basis for this entire concept. I couldn't find any remnants of it, so for all intents and purposes, I'm basically making this up. Essentially, people had this idea that Homestuck's quest would culminate in the creation of the real world. In other words, Homestuck would end up being one great big creation myth, and John, Dave, Rose, Jade et al. Were actually the creators of humanity as you and I know it. This, of course, never happened, but you have to admit it's the kind of bullshit Hussey would pull if he knew he could impress someone with it. The evidence for this was how the humans from Homestuck don't seem entirely human. For instance, their irracial paper-white skin and slightly non-human physiology is sometimes interpreted literally instead of symbolically. Also, they have Silodexes and game constructs. This leads people to note that humans in Homestuck are not entirely like us, that they are something different, not unlike the similar but different gods of Norse and Greek paganisms. For another, the world as depicted in both versions of Earth, Alpha and Beta, aren't quite the same either. Less like Earth is the Alpha Kid's Earth, but the Beta Kid's Earth is also different in certain ways. Something that muddles this theory is the fact that Beta Earth, the one John comes from, has a significant overlap with ours, with the same movies, same brands of snacks, etc. For this project, let's take the following assumption. Homestuck describes a slow process of attempting to make the Earth that we live upon, the so-called ultimate reward, the thing that all the characters seek. Every planet that is created by Suburb is an attempt at creating the perfect world, but each attempt failed over and over until the combined forces of the trolls and kids created Earth C, the one we presently live on. This would explain why the Earths of Homestuck are uncannily similar but not quite, and why Homestuck's humans are like us but not quite. It's a fun theory, but it makes you think. What if the heroes from Homestuck were our progenitors? What would the resulting religion of these progenitors be like? What would it be called? After our journey through the history of humanity and religion, let's build a new one on the foundation of Homestuck. This is the construction of a religion, a faith, known as aspectism. The word canon originated with Christianity as a way to denote certain texts as being part of their holy book, the Bible. Canon essentially has come to mean which texts are valid in a literary context. For example, there are many works that were produced in the Star Wars universe, but only the films and certain comic media are considered canon to the events that took place. In another way, it could be understood as the real events that occurred with respect to a fictional world. Canon also has a lot to do with Homestuck, both in the real world and in the religion of aspectism. And as is anything that is worth talking about, canon is hotly contested. What is canon in this hypothetical Homestuck religion of aspectism, then? Much like real-world religions, there would likely be several interpretations of canon which would form different sects. Sects would usually form due to schisms between interpretations of Scripture and usually go by different names. We would call these sects subgroups based on real-world arguments about Homestuck. There are several sects that spring to mind. First is the strictest sect, the Cascade Aspectists, or Cascadians. These would reflect the people who only consider the events up to Act 5 to be valid. There is a popular notion that everything after Act 5's Cascade is not the same as original Homestuck for various reasons. This is usually held by old MSPA forum holdouts or Reddit users. The Cascadians believe in a more mysterious interpretation of Homestuck scripture and are less literal but more adamant in their beliefs. Second is another strict sect, the Egbertian Aspectists, or Egbertians. These followers would follow the central figure of John Egbert throughout his journey against Lord English. They believe that we inhabit Earth C and our destiny is to one day become as gods and create our own more perfect Earth. Still, any text outside Homestuck itself is invalid as canon to these people. This sect is fundamentalist in belief, but has a different focus to the Cascadians. More permissive are the Hussian aspectists. They see the collection of Homestuck, Hiveswap, and Skynet systems lore to be canon, as they were all written in entirety by Andrew Hussey, who they consider a prophet on the level of Jesus or Muhammad. They would consider anything with only some involvement, like Homestuck 2 or the epilogues, to be non-canon, but still consider them useful teachings. They are less fundamentalist and have a focus on worldly enlightenment. Finally, there are the Reform aspectists. They are the most permissive sect and see Homestuck as a central text around which several other texts are canonized. Homestuck, Homestuck 2, the epilogues, and of course Pesterquest and Hivebent are all canon, but there must be a great deal of interpretation by scholars to identify relevant teachings. This is a sect more concerned with personal enlightenment and philosophy, and could be compared to real-world Reform religions like Reform Judaism and Unitarianism. The umbrella term aspectist, of course, refers to the idea of aspect, and it being a fundamental force in nature and society. Each sect would have a different idea of these, and even consider different ones real or not. This is the commonality that all sects share, much like all Abrahamic religions believe in a monotheistic God. Since aspectism isn't monotheistic, it's likely there would be some parallels to paganism, especially Norse and Greco-Roman tradition, with various pantheons of major and minor gods with different roles. Much like Zeus is the leader of the gods, John is the leader of his pantheon. There are also nefarious and evil figures such as Bec Noir and Lord English, which would serve a similar role to the devil in modern Christianity, and the Ahriman in Zoroastrianism, creating a sort of dualism between the good gods and the singular nefarious figures. It's likely this demiurge figure would be contested. The Cascadians would obviously think of Bec Noir as the primary evil, whereas Egbertians, Hussians, and Reformists would think of Lord English as their main adversary for differing reasons. Reformists would largely reject the dualism of other sects due to the greater focus on humanity of the main figures. Already, complex feelings on Homestuck can be expressed through religion. Furthermore, there would likely be specific cults to the various gods of the pantheon, possibly forming sects of their own or crossing between sects, much like non-denominationalism today in Christianity. The cult of Vriska, for instance, might focus on the exploits of Vriska and give her special worship. Egbertians would likely believe in the central authority of the cult of John, as they see him as the main figure. Strife would abound between sects, mostly between the Cascadians and Egbertians. Reformists would likely not participate in conflict in an attempt to cast as wide a net as possible, much like the more permissive sects of religion today, and the Egbertians and Hussians would likely have a great deal of common ground. The main debate between Egbertians and Hussians would likely be about the literality of the scripture and Act 7's ending. To summarize, then, all four sects would have the following in common: a belief in numerous deities who use the game to create the world, a belief in 12 fundamental aspects that govern our world in some way, a belief in the duality of good and evil exemplified by gods and one of Homestuck's demons. Religious belief, for the individual, has three main purposes: moral teaching, metaphysical information, and higher meaning. The only higher meaning I can get from Homestuck is what I get out of a fucking bong while I'm reading it. Am I right, gamers? In extant Christianity, there is the story of the Ten Commandments, where specific rules are documented, such as, "Thou shalt not kill." This would be the moral teaching. There's also the story of Genesis, which provides metaphysical information pertaining to the beginning of the world. This, of course, is not a literal belief in the modern era, but is still useful. Finally, higher meaning can be achieved by following the doctrine outlined in these teachings. For instance, the idea that Jesus died for our sins, forgiving us of original sin and getting us a spot in a living afterlife. When you think of moral teaching, you might not think of Homestuck, but there is much to be learned from it. A reading from Homestuck, Act 5, Act 2, 3820. The Gospel of Scratch. Abridged Pocket Edition. And Terezi looked into the future, seeing the fight between the demon and Vriska within their medium. She saw its highs and lows, and the clash of swords. She saw in her mind's eye the thief of light do battle with his foe. Not events transpiring, but ones come to pass. When Terezi saw these things, she saw too the demon, turning tail and running from the fight, leaving faster than the thief of light could follow. The seer of mind saw him return to their meteor home and slaughter her peers. She could not allow this to come to pass. I can defeat him, said the thief of light unto the seer of mine in present time. You can, said Terezi, but at what cost? A toss of the coin shall decide your fate. And so the seer of mine flipped her coin, to the delight of the thief of light, for the thief could surely sway the outcome of any simple game of chance. The coin was a ruse, however, and Terezi, heart heavy, plunged her sword through the chest of her old friend, killing her justly. She fell to the ground to join the dying dreamers. Terezi collapsed and wept. This, of course, is a very memorable Homestuck moment, but it actually can teach us something to apply to daily life, both from the perspective of Vriska and of Terezi. From Vriska, this situation might be more relatable than one might think. We've all had situations we're cocksure of that don't go the way we want. In fact, any measure of positivity of outcome is impossible to gain. Vriska probably could have defeated Bec Noir, but, as Terezi says, at what cost? Vriska turns her back on her friends to chase a fool's errand and pays the price when the demon kills her friends. Perhaps we could make this teaching into a fun little saying. Don't turn your back to fight the demon. From Terezi's perspective, this situation is also rather relatable. Having to make a difficult decision to stay true to yourself. We've all been in a position where we may have to hurt someone's feelings or weigh their reaction against other outcomes. In Terezi's case, her situation was life and death, but it's important to stay true to your morals over the people you love. Again, distilling this into a saying, stay true to yourself, no matter the cost. This is only one example of moral teaching, of course, similar to the New Testament stories of the Bible or the various myths and fables surrounding the Greco-Roman gods. Any number of passages could be examined for similar meaning mining, and it's not a stretch to say that many things we read or watch have these lessons baked in, intentionally or not. At this point, I'm sure you see the parallel between literature and scripture. The line between them is not so thick. The Bible is more similar to Homestuck than word count. Moral teaching is not the only thing to be gleaned from Homestuck, however. They really think reality is something happening to them, rather than something they are making every moment with every thought. Terezi Pyrope, Homestuck, 3097. I shall lead my soul towards heaven by pure thought, and by being well aware of the blessings which the Almighty Ahura shall pour down upon good deeds. I shall teach the people to strive for truth and follow righteousness. Ahuna Vaiti Gatha, Yansa 28:4. The year is 2021. Amy Marie is in shambles. Homestuck on Twitter has devolved into infighting and heinous bigotry. It feels more like a battleground than the cozy fan community which she once knew. She's beginning to wonder if it was always like this, if the Homestuck she remembers is simply a rose-tinted view of her nostalgic past. She sees one of her followers getting dogpiled by dozens of angry users with the profile pictures of Dave Strider. She wishes it was a joke. Her Discord is a minefield now. Her friend from high school has cut all ties because of an argument about the Candy timeline, and some of her old Tumblr associates are considering sending hate mail to the HS2 writers because of some righteous crusade about Dirk Strider's depiction as a villain. Amy looks at her profile, her follower count steadily ticking down, accounts disappearing from block lists and screamed misunderstandings. She wonders if she hates the name Yiffany because it's a reference to furry sex, or if she hates it because she's afraid to voice that she just doesn't care. Then, someone posts a picture of Roxy Lalonde smoking a blunt. For that instant, life is better. Aspects in Homestuck, of course, are the 12 named forces that the gods wield in their struggles. The way they interact with these aspects is their class, which is of secondary importance in this reading. Aspects are what govern life more broadly than the specific stories and parables within Homestuck. They are fundamental forces of nature, and their interpretations differ based on which you're a part of. They are embodied by certain gods who could be better understood as avatars for these aspects, each with their own lenses through which to view it. The through line between aspectism, no matter the sect though, is the outlook of aspects as being fundamental forces not just of nature, but humanity and sentient life itself. Think of them less as something that is naturally occurring like rocks and water, and more as forces that sway the human mind. For example, breath manifests in Homestuck as literal wind powers, but also as a certain narrative control that John seems to exert over the story. Time, too, gives Dave and Dorothea literal time powers, but also gives them a unique insight into the world and the role in Homestuck itself. We could understand these forces as mental forces, things we bring forth and perspectives on matters of the internal world. Breath is not a real tangible force so much as it is a universal constant that can be accessed by a person's mind. The 12 main aspects in no particular order are life, hope, space, breath, time, light, mind, rage, blood, void, heart, and doom. Cascadians view aspects as malleable. They agree that there are 12 depicted in their canonized Homestuck works, but that their real attributes remain a mystery. They also have a fondness for the piss aspect, which no other sect considers to be real. They believe that there could be more aspects than the ones depicted, and strive to learn about more defined and undefined aspects. They believe the aspects give literal powers. Egbertians view aspects as mysterious but rigid. They agree on the 12 depicted in canon, and believe that each person has a personal class and aspect that matches them that is static over time. They strive to be able to diagnose these aspects in others, and deny that aspect can be found on one's own. They do not believe that normal people can achieve the master classes, and this is considered controversial. They believe only avatars and players gain literal power from aspects. Hushians view aspects as analytical tools. They agree on the 12 aspects, but are willing to indulge others, though they do not canonize them in any regard. They believe people have one specific class and aspect that can only be found through personal intuition. They also believe it is malleable over time. They believe in complex models of class and aspect, such as reverse aspects or the class tree or class-spect analysis. The type of analysis Optimistic Dualist is known for. They do not believe in literal powers coming from aspects, only the will to execute already existing power. Reformists view aspect as ephemeral or even metaphorical. They agree on the main 12 aspects and indulge others, but keep their teachings limited. They believe you can choose any class and aspect that suits you and must strive to embody it once chosen. They do not believe in complex models and shy away from any definitive information, believing the most potential can come from one's personal beliefs. They believe in literal powers coming from aspects, but only subtle ones. If you think these views are far-fetched, you have not seen the extensive arguing about aspects that goes on to this day online. Writers like Optimistic Dualist and Will at Homestuck have written extensively not just about aspects, but meta-analyses of aspects as they could be interpreted. Just ask your friends, can you choose your own classpect? And you'll be faced down with many answers. Ask them, can a person be in the master class? And you'll get more answers still. Humans love debating these things. Analysis and meta-analysis are the backbone to media and religious discussion. The final piece of the puzzle is higher meaning. Discussion and analysis are well and good, but religion has a final ingredient that seems to elevate it above regular media works. Higher meaning in most religions comes in two forms: worldly purpose and an afterlife. For Christians, the broad strokes is that you act morally on earth and earn an eternal reward in heaven. This is the structure most religions follow. Greeks had higher and lower planes of Hades, the Vikings had Valhalla for those who died in battle, and the Egyptians punished the wicked with oblivion. In Homestuck, the model would likely look something like this. If you strive to fulfill the role of your aspect, you will get to live as a ghost in the dream bubbles. The dream bubbles is a fascinating concept. It's actually the whole reason I made this video. The idea of the dream bubbles as an afterlife. In most religions, there's a very general sense of living well or being good, like enlightenment in Buddhism, and there's usually a heaven that is described for the moral and righteous that is only ever defined in vague terms. In fact, heaven is rarely overtly described in the New Testament at all. The dream bubbles are a whole different deal, with a greater sense of urgency. Think of it this way. If the dream bubbles are a reflection of your own life and memories, you will construct your own heaven or hell. If you have a horrible time when you're alive, your afterlife will be horrible. If you enjoy your memories fondly, you'll have heaven. In this way, you are directly responsible for your own personal heaven. Moreover, since you meet the specters of others in your bubbles, you are directly responsible for others' experiences. Broadly, we could call this outlook urgent hedonism, or the idea that pleasure, comfort, and meaning must be prioritized over anything else for the sake of your eternal soul. This also creates a different framework than any other religion, except maybe Mormonism. In other religions, you have to adhere to someone else's pre-made plan for you, God or Zeus or Odin or whoever, but in aspectism, you have to adhere to your own plan. You become the architect of your life and afterlife. Now, the existence and experience in the dream bubbles is likely contested among the sects, with Cascadian and Reform aspectists likely not agreeing with a literal afterlife due to Homestuck explicitly mentioning that the dream bubbles are only for players, but Hussians and Egbertians would likely believe in universal bubbles. There might also be steps that need to be taken to gain access to this afterlife, especially in Egbertian aspectism, where they would likely have some requirement for completing your awakening as your classpect in order to become a valid player. This model of an afterlife is very fun and doesn't really reflect any real-world beliefs that I know of. I like it a lot because even if there is no afterlife, aspectism would preach that it's imperative to live a good life through yourself and others, which is nice. Aspectism so far is a complicated but straightforward set of beliefs that are reflective of the real world. It's not particularly difficult to construct, and one could likely undertake a similar project for any long-form piece of art. There are already mock religions based on Star Wars and The Big Lebowski, but you could form religion around Seinfeld or The Simpsons, or more niche properties like Undertale or Five Nights at Freddy's. I would be willing to bet money that someone already has. It's easy to cover scripture, canon, and belief, but so far there has been very little discussion of what religious ritual in aspectism would look like. As stated near the beginning of this piece, if religion is the foundation of society, then ritual is the foundation of religion. Ritual is something we all do, from the practical behaviors such as clocking in for work, to the social, like singing at karaoke, to the formal, like attending church service. Ritual exists in Homestuck too, and would presumably carry over into aspectism. Most real-world religions have a meeting place, usually a ritual building with certain replicable features. Christians have churches, Jews have synagogues, Buddhists have temples. There are a wide variety of locations and purposes, but a real-world concrete space is vital. Aspectism's place of worship would likely be more like the temples of the ancient Greeks and Romans, massive stone monuments to heroes with trophies and statues on display, where people could come at their leisure to see the icons of the faith. As said, aspectism would reflect paganism in that beliefs are anchored by mythological figures, in this case being the players. It's likely similar to Greece. The local worship would depend on the temples present, like how Athens' worship was based around Athena, and Sparta's worship was based around Ares and Artemis. Rituals would be similar to these ancient pagans too, with festivals and holy days observed universally, with special emphasis placed on places of worship. Norse pagans often offered feasts and sacrifices to their gods, and while sacrifice is unlikely in aspectism, feasts seem particularly apt. For more daily, weekly, or regular service, this would likely take the form of meditation and prayer, for each sect has a focus on self-betterment and connection to the aspects. Much like in Islam and Hinduism, service would reflect formalized meditation led by a holy leader. As in Shinto and Buddhism, there may also be monks who devote themselves in extreme to the embodiment of these aspects. So, in ornate temples, the masses would come together not just to worship their gods, but to meditate on the nature of their own self-betterment and enlightenment by way of the holy aspects. Cults may have religious holidays and miscellaneous yearly rituals, such as Dionysian feasts for Roxy and Stoic reflection in honor for Equus Zahak. Since Homestuck is a visual work, it's likely that the architects would have much to go on in terms of design for these temples and shrines, and visual icons would be important. most vitally of the 12 formal aspect symbols. Much like in real-world religion, ritual could also be inspired by Scripture. A reading from Homestuck 3087, The Gospel of the Wayward Vagabond, abridged pocket edition. And so John died, his flame of life extinguished. Upon the slab, his life passed in unconsciousness, and in slumber he did die. But upon seeing this, the fireflies above descended and took notice of the air of breath floating to his side to comfort his cooling form. The wayward vagabond looked on in awe, frozen by the sight seen across the land of wind and shade, and sky of both. Wind and light congregated around these fireflies, and John's deceased body was shrouded in it. None within saw the transformation, but by sky and miracle, John's clothes were changed and his body repaired, and when the wind settled and the fireflies dispersed, John was not just alive again, but reborn anew, in a new body, on Skaya. Bec Noir watched in silence, his visage cold. His slaying only sealed his fate. Dying upon a quest bed is a common symbol in Homestuck and would likely be of significance to aspectists. Death and dreams are intertwined in aspectism, so quest beds would likely be fixtures in shrines and temples. It may also be a ritual to place the soon-to-be dead on quest beds of their aspect, or to place people on their quest beds after death to be buried. Quest, of course, would be the aspectist shorthand for journey, faith, and life, and beds would be an important symbol. You might think what I've written so far is tenuous. You might be sitting alone at home thinking that I'm talking up my ass, or that religion and fandom aren't the same thing, that this is all just some joke piece and Funk is being silly again. But I'm not being silly, I'm being serious. Everything I've said so far is entirely hypothetical, but there are aspects of Homestuck that are the subject of ritual in the fan community right now, across a wide array of viewpoints. In other words, no matter who you are, if you like Homestuck, you know what 413 means, and you probably celebrate it yourself in some way. You likely observe character birthdays like Carcat on 6/12, or the cluster of days in December that Dave, Jade, and Rose have, shared with their alpha counterparts. Homestuck has holidays already. Homestuck has rituals. Homestuck has sites where adherents congregate. It might be less prominent now, but Homestuck used to have a massive convention presence for better and worse. Gray skin paint being sealed was a meme in the olden days, solidifying best practices to act out your love for a webcomic. What's the word for that again? It's ritual. It's ritual. Eventually, these things become greater than their source material. When I say the word Homestuck, do you think of the webcomic or do you think of its fan base? The word comes to mean both and one and the same. It comes to mean something more than it originally meant. Let me be clear. This is real. Homestuck has ritual, and Homestuck has spirituality extant in the world, especially in the past with con-going culture before the pandemic. This goes back to this piece's beginning, religion being replaced by culture. The relationship has been reversed. Think, too, of how seriously people take Homestuck and other media, especially on YouTube, Tumblr, Twitter, and other social media. Think of the amount of venom and intense hatred spilled over imaginary characters. Did this behavior happen in ages past? What kind of vitriol has been spilled about religion? To be clear, there have been no fandom holy wars or anything, and this is limited to America and the West, so the magnitude is rather different, and fans of mass media are far more quixotic, but the parallels exist, and they cannot be denied. If we exist in a fandom where the stakes are high, we must consider the care with which we treat fan content. I'm not saying we have to become fan police or whatever, but understanding that is vital for a continued existence in a fandom space that is becoming increasingly spiritual. Also, don't be afraid to draw higher meaning from Homestuck. Don't let yourself be convinced that it's just a silly niche interest. Again, to bring up something from the beginning, Nietzsche said that God is dead and we must make our own meaning. We can start with the things we share with others and mean a lot to us already. I suddenly don't understand anything, and I'm currently casting sincere doubt on the laughable insinuation that I, or anyone else, actually ever did for a single moment. Kanaya Marian, Homestuck 7385. I know that I know nothing. Attributed to Socrates by Plato. The year is 2023, Amy Marie still works at Target. She still folds clothes, and her life shows no evidence of improving. Her friends who were nurses are now working at Target too. Even though she doesn't have their student debts, she doesn't feel like she made it out any better than they did. It's a hot July day, and her only comfort from the heat, as she leans against the wall in refuge, is her screen. She's still on Twitter, and she still remembers Homestuck. It feels so long ago that she first went to SAHCon, and she doesn't even remember that fateful day she first saw her friend's fan troll. It feels bittersweet to see people involved in something that she loved for so long. It feels like her love has been stretched out across time, and it feels like she can't keep up. But it also feels good to simply let her peers' work flow into her, to enjoy it like never before. Amy Marie's life, like the lives of everyone she knows, is boring and dreadful. But in those moments when she sees someone reply to her nostalgia-filled post about her very first con or how excited she is to go to SAHCon again, she feels a tiny spark of delight. There are 1,000 reasons to despise Homestuck. Its creator, its execution, its ending, its themes. There are 1,000 reasons to despise its fans, their behavior, their racism, their transphobia, their hatred. But for every 1,000 reasons to despise it, there are 1,000,000 to love it and seek refuge in it. When is a work more than the sum of its parts? When does a work transcend its pages and script and turn into something as alive as the people with a hand in making it? When does a work graduate from a simple piece of media with authors and fanatics and turn into something which great pieces of human lives are devoted to? Isn't it absurd that people would devote themselves in ruination to a webcomic that is treated as the vast joke of the internet? And yet here we are, for the simple joy of writing and drawing and creating and discussing. For every slight, every scar, every bruise caused by a love for something greater than oneself, there is a great comfort for those who love to take it. Or in a less pretentious way, we're all here because we got sucked into liking this webcomic from 2009. We might as well enjoy it, right? I mean, fuck, come on, people. Let's just have a good time. There's also Rosemary. Rosemary's a really cute ship. I really just like Rosemary. Rose Lalonde and Kanaya Marin were made for each other, and I hate it when people try to break them up. I mean, come on, they're so cute. I want the best for them. I seriously think they're one of the best relationships in media ever. Fuck, I love these two. God damn. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars, forever and ever. Daniel, chapter 12, verse 3. In the dream, I am the star. It's me, Ella Jeff.